Tautoko Ora Akiwa Centre for Pacific and Global Health at the University of Auckland, also in partnership with the Niue Department of Health. I'd like to invite Lisimoni Togahai over in Niue to start us off with a liongi. Over to you, Moni.
Noela he Jess, whilo ke atua mo liongi, hamalu iki, ko koe koe atua hamo i atu mo lilifu. Ko whakatokotui atu ki ho mua ke hawhiawhi nei. Ke liwa ke atu e tau oe tultulou, a koe hawa takitaki anga mawhala ke hama tōlu a tau mamui. Mahui ngai hawhiawhi nei mai ki nai, a kua kau whakalataha, me toko tōlu e pulotu Niue New Zealandi, ke whakamatala hanga ao ke halito he ilo ilo, loto matala me pulotu he tangata Niue. Ko koe ne whioia e tau menausi. Mua atu ko koe ne fua ki mai e loto matala, ke whakawhaika kanoa ki hama tōlu a tau mamui. Pese ni kua ke he tau motu ne tā kele ai ka tahani a tōlu ki mua hao. Pale atu ke hawa whakamunui nana ke tānanga nei, mua atu ke fua ki mai e loto matala me pulotu, ke aonga tau tau hawanga ke matauhu mahuinga nei. Whakamunui na fua ke alau tōlu osi ko whanongo mai ke whakahaolanga nei, a kua whakaue atu mai ki nei, ke hawa hingoa lilifu mo e tapu. Amen.
Amen. Tilo mamone. Hawa e tau maanga ko motolau mo Hektovake, ko e tama pasisi au, ko e matua tāne haku ko Ben Pasisi, ko e matua whiwhine haku ko Michael. My dad is the youngest brother of the Pasisi crew with our family home up in Papuaka in Motolau, and my auntie Nolene and her family based in Alofi. Ko e hingoa haku ko Jess Pasisi. My name is Jess, and it's an honour to take over the hot seat from Sir Colin, as facilitator for this evening's Niue webinar, Niue Knowledge and Research. This evening's event is part of a broader series which has covered introductions to research, Niue research ethics, and Indigenous data sovereignty. This session is recorded and will be available for viewing alongside the previous sessions on the Te Tautoko Ora Akiwa YouTube channel. The purpose of this webinar series has been developing skills and access for Niue colleagues in Niue for ambitious, vibrant and useful research, and to connect with and grow research expertise. It's also a space, as Minister Talangi mentioned in the last webinar, for all researchers interested in connecting with Indigenous identity and culture. And this evening, we showcase Niue research excellence with our esteemed panelists, Professor Vilinosa, Lisimoni Birtha Togahai, and Ioane Alekefa Avai. Niue knowledge is a topic close to my heart, and the research work I do here in Pacific Studies based at Otago Whakaihu Waka, the University of Otago. I'm fortunate to actually have worked with all three of the panelists this evening and know they have and continue to make really important contributions to Niue knowledge and Niue research. While these three panelists wear many hats academically and in the community, I'm grateful to them for accepting the invitation to share some of the incredible work they are doing in the Niue research space. Mone Ioane and I recently collaborated with Inangaro Wakawhi, Rennie Atfield Douglas and Cora Ellen Lafaiki Twist on an article published with Waka Kuaka, the Journal of Polynesian Society, which Vili was one of the reviewers for, and he was very, very assertive with what we needed to do better, which is good. We need that kind of critique. The article, fitting for tonight's panel, was titled Celebrating Loto Matala Niue Knowledge in Community and Researcher Collaborations, and references some of the vast body of Niue knowledge that has been published alongside a collective of Niue researchers in lots of different spaces, reflecting on the value of Niue knowledge in their respective areas. Shortly, the panelists tonight will give 10-minute presentations, and at the conclusion of all three presentations, we'll have time for questions from the audience, which you can post into the Zoom chat at any time. Niue knowledge is indeed vast, rich, and dynamic. But what is Niue knowledge? I wanted to start by inviting the panelists to briefly describe what Niue knowledge means to them as a way of contributing to the specificity of what Niue knowledge can mean. So we'll start with Vili. What does Niue knowledge mean for you?
Thanks, Jess, for the introduction. For me, for my understanding, for my Niue knowledge, it's based on the work that I've been doing for the last how many years as an academic, also as a Niue researcher. It's using the knowledge that I have and what I've been taught by my parents, my grandparents, my family, and those Niue people that I've surrounded myself with, and asking in terms of their knowledge or what they know about certain things in the Niue practice or culture. So that's the way that I've actually learned a lot of my learnings around the knowledge, but also reading a lot of the Palangi academics who've written a lot about us in the past. And some of those things that I've read, I don't actually agree, because that's their storytelling about us, their narratives about telling what they interpret, what they know. But for me, it's telling the true version or true voices of what I understand from my own perspective. So that's in short, Jess, that's how I understand what Niue knowledge is in terms of my training, my academic, my research that I've been doing for the last how many years. So for koe
Wow. Moni, over to you.
Whakaloa whawhiwhi atu ke tō osi ko whanaonga mai ke he tō whakatutalan he awhiwhinei. Greetings and welcome to everyone, especially the Niue diaspora, and everyone else who are listening into this webinar this evening. My name is Birtha Lisimoni Togahai from the villages of Hakupu and Abasea. I live in Alofi now, married to Alofi man, retired director of education, and continuing in my role as the coordinator of the University of the South Pacific certificate in Niue since the qualification was offered in 2019. It is an honor and privilege to join this free Niue Pulotu this evening, Professor Vili Nosa, Dr. Jess Basisi, and Io Aleke. So what is Niue knowledge in research? I believe that there are three predominant levels upon which Niue knowledge is premised. The first one is general or collective knowledge. The second one is based on group, tribal, or village knowledge. And the third one is spiritual, sacred, family knowledge. Many of us has that common general knowledge, learning from our grandparents, as Vili has also alluded to, parents, members of the wildlife, our friends and colleagues. This is mutu kehe selinga type of knowledge where families and people do things together at home, at the plantation, at sea, in the village, in church, as a whole. And all this knowledge is pertinent to our livelihood survival. You observe and you put it into practice, but you keep refining the skills until you perfect it to your mentor's satisfaction. A good example of this knowledge is using a particular herb to treat cuts at the plantation or out in the environment, or how to safely hold an unga without it biting you. The second group knowledge is knowledge that's limited to the families in the same village, where they know their own hunting grounds, tracks, land to use for plantations, fishing areas, and people from other villages are not allowed to trespass. The third level is the spiritual or sacred knowledge, which is restricted to a few families, such as herbal medicines, massage, mulu, canoe building, crafts, arts, and weaving. This type of knowledge is known to be inherited or gifted and is not shared to anyone other than selected family members. In Niue, the Pacific knowledge comes with responsibilities of stewardship. As custodians of Niue knowledge, there is responsibility and accountability, not only to those we receive the knowledge from, but responsibility and accountability to our ancestors who have gone before us and future Niue descendants to come. For example, the University of the South Pacific certificate in Niue that I will be presenting later on, represents a negotiated neutral zone of shared knowledge and understanding. Students discuss these different levels of knowledge with utmost respect and weighing heavily in their minds the need to protect some of this indigenous knowledge whilst balancing it with ways of knowing more about their culture, identity, values, arts, and the worldview out there. Sharing of information in class discussions focus mainly on local and familiar knowledge within the safe space of their families and village environments. And that, in a nutshell, is my own perspective of Niue knowledge.
That's a very large nutshell, but I appreciate it. Over to you, Ma'io.
Palafalahi atu ke tau tolu ke he ngahu nei. Ke tau pulotu tau rilifu, pia fōki me tau matakainanga Niue, ko haifu ni ko whakatama ke ngahu a whiawhi nei. Koe he ingoa e loto matala bu ke pulotu ke au e tangata Niue. Koe loto matala, whakamotu ko e whakaweanga he tūtonuhia he tangata Niue, moe hana matutakianga. Ke he tau mena, bu ke tau motu, ne e whakawahenga i ke he tōru e weweheanga. Ko tau ia ki ai, e tau mga whaoa, pia fōki mo e roto matala, i loto he tau maanga, pia fōki mo e motu. Kai au fia ki ai e tau matapatu nei, whonua ngaro, langi tua taha mo langi tua ua. From the Niue worldview, loto matala, pulotu, knowledge is deeply embedded within the sacred cosmological framework that is connected to three interrelated realms, which is whonua ngalo, the underworld representing ancestral origins and spiritual foundations of knowledge. Also langi tuataha, the middle realm encompassing whonua, or the land, and the tahi, or sea, where knowledge is practiced, tested, and lived. And the third, langi tuaua, the upper realm, or sky, or the langi, where knowledge is elevated and sanctified upon reaching its highest form. This structure reflects the sacred journey of knowledge from its spiritual inception to its practical application and eventual perfection. And within this framework, knowledge is not only a cultural asset, but a spiritual responsibility governed by protocols of tapu and upheld through mana by those entrusted to carry and transmit.
Already you can tell this evening we're going to have some richness, right? Even if we're starting here, right? This particular platform of engaging with Niue knowledge was already very expansive, right? There's lots of different ways we can connect to this topic. So with that in mind, let's hear from our first presenter. And as he sets up, I'll do a little blurb about his background. So Professor Vili Nosa. Vili is the head of the Pacific Health Section, School of Population Health, Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences at the University of Auckland. He is an adjunct associate professor of Public Health at the School of Public Health at the University of Queensland's Faculty of Medicine. Vili has a background in sociology and behavioural science. He has significant experience in health research, particularly focusing on Pacific communities. He has several Niue-specific research projects, along with an impressive list of research publications, and is an active senior Niue academic with a growing number of Niue postgraduate students. If you happen to be in Tamaki on Thursday, 11th of September, Vili will also be giving his inaugural professorial lecture. So over to you, Vili.
Thanks for the introduction, Jish. I just want to make a bit of clarification I'm no longer the head of the department. It's Togahai Kasene now. So she's in charge of our department. So yeah, just want to make that point out. So anyway, my presentation is going to be looking at Niue knowledge and research. And I want to talk about two particular projects that I've worked previously and then one I've got currently. So the first one that I have is looking at Niue men's perception of health and health services on the island of Niue. It's a qualitative study. And I'll talk about that in a bit more detail as I continue with my slides. The next study that I want to talk about is our current one, which is looking at a study of Samoan, Tongan, Cook Island Māori, and Niue infant care practices. So these are the two examples that I'll provide in terms of Niue knowledge and using it in terms of what it looks like within research. So the first study is the men's perception of health and health services on the island of Niue. It's a qualitative study. I did this research a few years back, and it was looking at men's perceptions around health and well-being, but also accessing health services in Niue. So we were able to go back to Niue, do 20 interviews within a week in terms of finding out what their knowledge was around accessing health services or what their definition is and what they actually see as in terms of health and well-being. So there were a number of key findings, and I won't talk too much in detail about, but I'll just give you some brief ones in terms of the findings. So a lot of the men had a good knowledge around their healthy and unhealthy behaviors. They also had a lot of knowledge around accessing Niue's hospital in terms of their health services. They knew a lot about what was healthy eating and what was unhealthy eating. So a lot of them knew about, high blood pressure, diabetes, gout. These are some of the common illnesses a lot of the men had said to us in terms of this particular research. But they also mentioned they had a good knowledge of some of the services that were available up in Niue, especially going to see the doctors. There was also issues around them not going to see the doctors in terms of masculinity, pride, stubbornness amongst our Niuean, because they felt there was, to be a male, you have to show that strong sense of masculinity. So a lot of them weren't keen on going to see the doctors, but they knew what the services was available. So I'll put this particular slide up. If you want the paper, I think Jess is going to make it available. It's a nice little piece of research that we did in terms of men's health profile, in terms of accessing services up in Niue, and also some of the suggestions that they wanted in terms of health programs that were available. So that's our first project. The second one I'll talk about is a study of Samoan, Tongan, and Cook Island Māori and infant care practices. And that study is looking at our mothers and our grandmothers in terms of infant care practices, but also in terms of infant sleeping practices, but more so in terms of sources of information. So as you can see from our team, there's myself, there's Dame Tuila Percival, Dr. Marion Heather, Dr. Neen Painter, Dr. Fiona Language, Dr. Niue Seve, because we also have an arm in the Cook Islands, which Niue is leading at the moment. And then Dr. Amio Martinga Kihele is leading our Niue arm up at Niue. And we also have Kalesita Pole. So as I said, I've kept these two projects in terms of looking at Niue knowledge and research in terms of the two projects that I have that's completed, but also a project that we have currently going on at the moment. The next slide I want to highlight is some of the principles around Niue knowledge and research. So I've only selected 6 of the ones that I felt they were quite important and relevant. So the first one that I have here, ethical practices in terms of acquiring Niue knowledge in terms of research. So some of the practices that we tend to do at the university, we have to apply for ethics approval in order to do research amongst human participants. We have to get that approval before we do any collecting of information or collecting of data. We also needed approval from up in Niue, and we did get that approval for our infant care practices, but also our Niue men's project. The next one I want to talk briefly about is the cultural knowledge and also the expertise. We needed our own people to provide this sort of cultural knowledge and expertise around points around the project that we had, especially with the men's health project and also the infant care practice. So a lot of them provided, or people that I engaged or asked for knowledge around what would be relevant in terms of looking at our men's health, Niue men's health, but also what would be relevant in terms of looking at our infant care practices. So again, this leads on to the engagement and also the consultation. That to me is quite relevant and important in terms of engaging and consulting and asking, what's relevant, what's useful in terms of our knowledge, what's going to be more impactful, and doing research that's going to make a difference, and it's going to make changes, whether it's programs, whether it's policies, but it has to be there has to be a need for change and making a point of difference. The fourth point I want to highlight is reciprocity. We often take knowledge and information from our people, but there's often things that are not, there's no giving back. There's no sort of giving back in terms of their time. So what we do often in my research is that we give them like a gift voucher or food basket, something that they have to return, for them sharing that information in terms of their knowledge that they have provided for us. The next one is capacity building. This is quite important for me because we want to build a capacity around our Niue researchers. At the moment, there's not a lot of us around, but it'd be nice if we build that capacity, especially for the young ones that are coming through, in terms of teaching them the knowledge and how to do research, what's culturally appropriate, what's suitable, and what's relevant in terms of acquiring all this knowledge. So the last one that I have in my presentation and slide is the dissemination process. It's always important to try and give back that knowledge to the community, and in terms of presenting in a way that they understand, or they can take this knowledge forward and using it in terms of its relevance and making a point of difference or making changes that that'll be useful for our Niue community. So that's my presentation. I've kept it quite short and brief for koe lai, for listening, and I'm open to have any questions later on in the discussion.
Wahau e lahi mahaki ma Professor Vili, and apologies to Kara. It's incredible, right? It's a really useful way of grounding and setting up the seminar in terms of talking about the potential, right, that we have as Niue scholars, but also for people who are interested in doing this research as well. So hopefully, if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat. We'll definitely come back to them later on. Now I will send it over to the much warmer Niue, and where Birtha Lisimoni will present. So Mone is the coordinator for the certificate in Niue, in Wangahau Niue, and Niue's master's program at the University of the South Pacific in the Niue campus. She was the former director of the Department of Education in Niue and has held many education and language-related positions. Mone established and coordinates several writing groups in Niue, provides mentorship for Niue researchers. She also holds several advisory and leadership positions in the community, including as a founding member of the Matala He Taumea Collective. Over to you, Mone.
Yeah, kaulai Matis, kaulai Mavili. The topic of my presentation is sharpening Niue knowledge with the USB or the University of the South Pacific certificate in Wangahau Niue. Next slide. So I have 4 objectives. Objectives, background, the USB certificate in Wangahau Niue, and the final note is expanding the USB certificate in Wangahau Niue to the Niue diaspora. So the first objective, why the certificate in Wangahau Niue? Second objective, how the certificate in Wangahau Niue promotes, enhances, and sustains Niue knowledge. Third, turning this knowledge into resources for all education levels. And finally, the working in collaboration with overseas tertiary researchers. So the discussions about designing a course on Niue studies has been ongoing for decades. especially when Niue was the first country in the Pacific to publish its suite of Tohi Wangahau Niue. The first bilingual Tohi Wangahau Niue dictionary was published in 1994 under the leadership of the Director of Education at that time, the late Atapana Sakimoto, and team Whakahula Misimesi Funaki, Sifaali Ioane, Pitasoni Tanaki, and Spellage. This was followed by the monolingual Tohi Wangahau Niue in 2005 under the leadership of Lose Lingipepe Sakimoto, with the same team but without spellage, but this time with linguist specialist Dr. Robert Early. In 2014, the Tohi Tawakina, the Wangahau Niue Thesaurus, was published under my leadership with the same team of Whakahula Funaki, Sifaali Ioane, and Dr. Robert Early. The second revised edition of bilingual Tohi Wangahau Niue was reprinted in 2022. All these Tohi Wangahau Niue are compulsory texts for the USB certificate in Wangahau Niue. When the Wangahau Niue Act 2012 became law, one of the main functions of the Niue Language Commission was to assist the government in developing Wangahau Niue programs for study not only at ECE, primary and secondary, but also at tertiary level and continuing education. So it was no surprise when the USB certificate in Wangahau Niue was launched in December 2018. Special acknowledgement to the following organizations and individuals for bringing this dream into fruition. The Niue Language Commission, led by Chairperson Sifaali Ioane, Taonga Niue Council, led by Taumalua Jackson, Department of Education and Department of Taonga Niue, led by Moira Enetama. Special tributes to all the Wangahau Niue experts involved in the writing up of this qualification, the late Atapana Sakimoto and Richard Hipa, Sifaali Ioane, Vainga Tukuitonga, Pitasoni Tanaki, Lose Lingipepe Sakimoto, Mine Malingi Pulu, Moira Enetama, Sherita Fatu, and last but not least, Dr. Robert Early, who assisted with the unpacking of this qualification. The qualification was offered at the University of the South Pacific Niue campus in 2019. The USB certificate in Wangahau Niue comprises of 6 papers, and all papers are delivered in Wangahau Niue. So there are 2 courses at the 100 level, Wangahau Niue 1 and Taonga Niue, 2 at the 200 level, Wangahau Niue 2 and Teaching of Wangahau Niue, and 2 at the 300 level, Contemporary Niue and Interpretation and Translation. The qualification was intended to train teachers to teach Wangahau Niue in the schools. However, because we do not have a pool of relieving teachers, only a few of them are able to join the Friday classes. So far, all 10 students that enrolled in 2019 completed the qualification and graduated in 2021. One of those graduates is now tutoring on the 100 level Taonga Niue course. Expanding Niue's body of knowledge. Assessments for the certificate in Wangahau Niue were designed in a way not only to create more vernacular resources for all education levels, but at the same time providing a huge learning experience for students through enhancing, promoting, and sustaining Niue knowledge. Students learn about the Niue indigenous knowledge, about the language, identity, values, arts, and what constitutes the essence of Tangata Niue. The research has awoken students' interest in learning more about Niue knowledge, develop confidence in talking to the elderly, sharing their own knowledge with colleagues, developing competence and connectedness for Niue knowledge, and their well-being as Tangata Niue. Students are more self-aware and asking the why questions over various aspects of culture. So how is the certificate in Whakahau Niue assessments has contributed to the Niue body of knowledge? Students through exploring Niue Ta'onga in depth has cultivated deep and sincerest respect for our forefathers who has passed on this unique knowledge to us. The students are fascinated about many Niue technologies such as the sika, the Niue waka, equipments for nupia, non-verbal ways of communications, and many more. The more the students learn, the more it makes them hungry for Niue knowledge. Also, through presentations of assessments in multimedia formats, helps them visualize Niue knowledge using technology and not just mutu ke selinga as our forefathers. Through the creation of PowerPoint presentations and videos, the knowledge is recorded and ensures sustainability for many generations. So where to for the certificate in Whakahau Niue? There's a wealth of knowledge of resources obtained from this qualification. Students' work needs to be packaged and converted to teacher-ready resources with a teacher's manual and students' workbooks. We also need a robust curriculum unit at USB, or we can share with the Department of Education. There's also opportunity for joint research partnerships between graduates of the certificate in Whakahau Niue and the Niue diaspora, if funding is available. We look forward to USB meetings with the Center for Pacific Languages, University of Auckland, Unitec, and MIT as their strong interest to offer this qualification in New Zealand. And definitely there is a need to train more tutors to teach this qualification. So in conclusion, being a student on the certificate in Whakahau Niue has transformed their perspective on Niue knowledge. There's a very positive and enlightening atmosphere in the class. The certificate has developed students' confidence and tools for critical thinking and problem solving, opportunities to go deeper into Niue epistemology, and students also accepted the fact that as custodians of this Niue knowledge, there is responsibility and accountability involved on their part, not only to those they receive the knowledge from, but responsibility and accountability to our ancestors as well as future Niue descendants. Before I take my leave, I wish to acknowledge key people who have contributed so much into this qualification. Pulotu Sifaoli Ioane, former Whakahau Niue specialist for the curriculum unit in the Department of Education, but continuing as head lecturer for this certificate. Former tutor Peter Soni Tanaki, Taonga Niue tutors Billy Graham Talangi, Sauni Tongatule, and Mura Enetama. Former graduate and education publications manager Susanna Sonetuato, and also Dr. Willens of the School of Pacific Arts, Communications and Education at USB, and especially all the graduates and current students of the certificate in Whakahau Niue. Special thanks to current student, Director of Health, Maneva Whailosa Ikimau, Dr. Leroy Tatu, and my current students, Julie Dalangi Funaki, Sinitama Tukuniu, Christine Ioane, Jenny Silona Eveni, Priscilla Kapanga Mokali, Joe S. Matani. Kawela mahaki to the organizers of this webinar series. Kawela mahaki whanongonongo mai.
It's so incredibly exciting to hear that the certificate of Whakahau Niue will be accessible online in the near future. And what an opportunity for universities in Aotearoa and other institutes to support this and hopefully support some access for tau tangata Niue to go to Niue so that they can also be part of the certificate while they are on island. Our third panelist is Ioane Alekifawai. Ioane is currently an academic development lecturer and Pacific and interim team leader for Pacific Success at Unitec. Until recent funding cuts, he was also teaching a very successful tertiary level wangahau course through the Manukau Institute of Technology. It was the only wangahau course at tertiary level offered in the whole of Aotearoa. So we're really hoping that that one comes back. Ioane is also the chairperson of the Matalau Ululau Tā Matehe Whanua Trust. He has also played a key role in the development of Wangahau Niue language curriculum for NCEA. And Ioane has also been and continues to be a cultural advisor and mentor for several Niue research projects and is a founding member of the Matala He Tomea Collective. Over to you, Maio.
Oela he Jess. Matutaki atu hea kua whalawhalaanga koe hingoa e loto matala am koe purutu Niue. Koe pataanga po koe whakaweanga he kehe loto matala he tangata Niue. Whakawea ki he tolu e fufuta po ke motu. Muitua ki he tau talatua i he tau tolu, hangawa ki he tau tupua whakamua he motu ko Niue. Whonua ngalo, koe motu i laro whonua ia. Ne toka ia i he tau loto matala, he tau tupuna whakamua tau rua ki tupuna. Pihia whoki mo e loto matala whakanganga. Koe motu ke waki ko langi tua taha. Haha he waha loto, he motu ko whunua ngalo, mo langi tua ua. Ke he motu ko langi tua taha, haha ki ai e whonua, mai hana matutakianga ki he tahi. Ko mai ki ai ke whangahua ki ai e tau loto matala. Moe ka matamata whoki. Pihia whoki mo e motu ki tolua ki ko langi tua ua. Poke haha ki lunga he langi. Ne toka ai ki ai e tau loto matala, ko kisia, ko hātaki, mo e mua atu e mitaki. Mai he langi tua taha. Ko e tuanga uho he loto matala, he tangata Niue, mai he wangahau. Ko e wangahau, ko e whakaweanga ia, ki he tau loto matala ki he kehe, ke tā piki mau ki ai e tangata Niue. Nā kai ni koe puhala ke mai ki a koe ki e matutaki me wharo tau tangata. Ka koe mai ki whuki a koe ke moe māmaanga hokulo, ke he longa i tau mina ki he kehe. Ke ia mo haua tūtonu hia koe tangata Niue. Pihia whoki, koe loto matala koe mua atu e whakatapuena. Ne whakahingo ai koe purutu. Takina mai he motu ko whunua ngaro. Hanei koe whalikianga, poke whamatapatuanga ia he māmaanga ko ke loto matala he tangata Niue. Ke mai ki ke moe matutakianga mai whunua ngaro, ke hoko atu. Ke he langi tua taha, ne he aha ki ai e motu, pia whoki mo e whunua mo tahi. Now, at the core of the Niue system of Loto Matala, the embodiment of knowledge expressed through Wangahau Niue. The Wangahau is not only a means of communication, but a vessel of cultural wisdom and identity. One of the most sacred forms of knowledge, pulutu, which originates from Whanuangalo, the underworld. This foundational knowledge is expanded and refined within Langi Tuataha, where there is sea and land, and once perfected, it ascends to Langi Tuaua, signifying its highest spiritual and cultural value. The elevation of knowledge between these realms is attributed to Maui Tama, who bridged the space between Whanuangalo and Langi Tuaua. Now, in sharing Loto Matala navigating tapu and protocols, the sharing of Loto Matala knowledge is often restrictive to its sacred nature and the protocols that govern its transmission. These knowledge systems are powered by mana and are categorized across 3 levels of cultural authority, which is the mangawhaua or family. Knowledge passed down through family lines such as traditional medicine, as mentioned before, or canoe making, are just some of the examples, is considered sacred and private. Second, knowledge within or lotomatala within the manga or village, which is specific to a village, including sacred sites, forts, caves, and sea tracks under tapu, is protected and shared only within the community. And also knowledge within the motu or the nation, common knowledge accessible to all, such as seasonal cycles for planting, harvesting, fishing, and hunting. Pihia e tuwhatuwhaanga, po ke matutakianga he tau lotomatala whakaniwe, wa maeki ke whakakisi ai ke he tōru e tau weweheanga ia. Koe lotomatala ki loto he tau mga whaua, wa maeki ke tuku hifo, po ke whuaki hifo ke he tau ohi ni loto he mga whaua, pita he whakatai atu, tunge tālanga, po ke tuwhunga he tau waka. Pihia whoki mo e lotomatala ki loto he tau maanga, taki toko taha. Whaka matawhainga ni ki loto he maanga. Koe tau mna ni, tunge tau lotomatala ki he tau matakawi whakatapu. Tau tau e po ke tau kolo. Tau ana. Tau halatahi ni kua whono. Me longa atu whoki. Pihia whoki me lotomatala ki loto he motu hatu tōru. Koe tau lotomatala ni I loa osi tau tangata laulahi. Whakatai atu behe nei, lotomatala ki he tau hiki anga he matangi. Pihia whoki ke mga aho ka toa e tau fua he whanua. Po ke hi e tau ika, po ke ame tau unga me longa atu whoki. For researchers, particularly those who are tangata niue and not immersed in the culture or non-tangata niue, engaging with these knowledge systems presents unique challenges. It is essential that researchers approach their work with cultural humility and adhere to appropriate protocols. Methodologies and fieldwork must be informed by local guardians to ensure respectful and accurate engagement with knowledge that may not be readily visible or accessible. Also, understanding the layered nature of Niue knowledge system is critical to preserving their integrity. Researchers must recognize that knowledge is not simply gathered, it is gifted, and its sharing is governed by ancestral, family, and communal obligations. Now on this slide here, I'm just giving some of the examples here, how I was talking before about the 3 realms and how they're being, how the knowledge is being transmitted from Whanuangalo to the Langi Tuataha and then Langi Tuaua. A good example of that would be the iriiri or the fan. Say, if you want to make a simple iriiri, we call it a kapapola. That's the one you would use when you're cooking outside an open fire. Then you move up with your level of knowledge. You start to weave a iriiri lauara, whakapakaua, you double the 2 leaves of the coconut, the coconut leaves, and you make this iriiri in here, which are double-sided. And now to the most sacred or the highest form, to the Langi Tuaua, as you can see there on the top right-hand corner, is the iriiri niue. So you can see there's different levels of knowledge of how you can transmit and perfect your knowledge. From a kapapola to a ilili lauana, and then the ilili Niue there on the right hand corner. And they also come with, you know, different knowledge and different vocabs of Wangahau Niue used in there. Same as the kato. You can start off with kato tapola. Sorry, I don't have the image of a kato molu. So kato tapola is for domestic purposes. You would use it for every day, like picking up your rubbish and putting in there, or peeling your taro, or you harvest your taro. That's a tapola. Now you move up to a kato molu, which you remove the midrib of the coconut leaf. And that's called a kato molu, but it's also called a kato momoi. So back in the days, when you are having your umu and you want to gift your kai to your tutakaina or your neighbor, you would put it in that basket, which is a kato molu or a kato momoi. And then you move up to the kato kautaha and the kato kaua, the very fine baskets there. So you can see here the levels of knowledge that are being transmitted and learned as you go through the process. Si pihia e whalodau whakakisianga ke he loto matala buke pulutu mo elo elo whakamotu buke tangata whakaniue. Kawele.
Oh, we're lucky. Mahaki ma Ioane. You can tell he's an educator, right? Like, oh, dang. Gets real deep in there. I appreciate the connections, right? That you're making between the kind of literal and metaphorical existence of Niue knowledge through practice, and in this case, through basket making. There's lots of work to do in this space. We're doing great with time, so we do have some space for audience questions. Lahi to all of the panelists. So we'll now take any questions that people do have. And I have one from earlier from David Schaff to Billy. So he says, thanks for the study in Niue. He asks, was there any fines on accessing health services in New Zealand?
Thanks for the question, David. We have another project here in New Zealand that I did a few years back, and that will give you the answers, because that project was specifically looking at our Niue men accessing health services, also accessing GPs, or why didn't go to the doctors. So I'll send that to you to have a look on the link. But that's another. So we didn't actually ask that question when we did it up in Niue, because there were two different studies that we looked at, looking at what's available up in Niue, but also what was available here in New Zealand.
Oh, hi, can you hear me? Vili, I was more referring, say for instance, sorry, I should introduce myself. I'm David Schaff and I work in the cancer space, the cancer agency. So I'm more kind of trying to hone in on cancer patients in Niue, for instance, or other chronic diseases that may need, assistance in New Zealand. So that's kind of where I was coming from, Vili.
Oh, okay. Maybe Colin might have a better answer than I have in terms of, because I know they're doing a bit of work up in Niue around cancer.
Oh, is that all right, Jess? The level of knowledge we have about, I'm talking specifically about Niuean adults, Niuean people to health services here, and it's actually pretty poor. I'm as guilty as the next person. We tend to put all of us in one big Pacific basket. And to some level, it's helpful, particularly if you're looking at others, Māori and others. But at another level, it's actually not that helpful, because in order for us to have meaningful communication with Niue communities, you really need more specific knowledge. So the work you've done really is probably what we have. I'm certainly not aware. People are asking for it, no question. Our Tongan cousins and Samoan are the same. People want the information, but we're just not there yet. I don't think would be the short answer, David. And we did some work recently on cancer control in the Polynesian countries, and in the case of Cooks and Niue, because people come here backwards and forwards, it gets even more complicated because sometimes they register and sometimes they don't. So yeah, for something that you think is quite simple and straightforward, it's not that clear. So young minds that are listening in, plenty of work here to keep you busy looking at not just Niue, but our Cook Island cousins and Tongans and Samoans, etc. would be a suggestion. While I've got the floor, as they say, Jess, can I ask Moni? I was a bit slow. When you were talking about the certificate and the possibilities of it being offered by other institutions, can you just share with us again what exactly is being planned? And I commend you and your team for the work you're doing with Wangahau, and perhaps something for those of us who don't live on island to connect in online and and use that. It sounds like a really valuable resource. But the question, Moni, is are you looking at this certificate or equivalent being made available through other institutions?
Yeah, whakawela Sir Tukutonga. I recently attended the Wangahau Niue retreat in Auckland back in July, and there was huge interest from representatives of the Center for Pacific Languages. Even had a meeting with their CEO, also the University of Auckland, Unitec and MIT. There's huge interest in delivering the certificate in Wangahau Niue in New Zealand. At this stage, I have communicated this request to Dr. Fiona Willens. She's my boss at the University of the South Pacific, and has passed on the contacts, and hopefully USB will be in contact with these people very soon. So that's the plan at the moment, to make the certificate available and deliver it in New Zealand so we can train more teachers to teach Wangahau Niue.
Yeah, that's really great. I do support that going through, and hopefully there's lots of receptive ears on our end as well, on the side. I do have a question from Joy Sipili. Joy, are you there? Did you want to ask your question? It's directed to Vili and Eo.
Vawe tulawa tu ke te turosi po awhiawhinei. Koe huhu, just a question through to Eo or Vili. Eo, you talked about tau kato kehe, and some of the work in Wellington that we're involved in is around looking at care of newborn in ethnic Pacific spaces. So Vili, Eo, it was a question to you both. Are there any, do you hold any knowledge around what newborns were, how they were taken care of in early days? Not a trick question, just if you had something to offer up there. And also, whawe atu ke atua ko moni ke hawa ngā hoa whauka ke tau Wangahau Niue a te turu. Hello, Jess, thank you.
Yeah, whakawhalahi atu ki a kai Joy ki hawhiawhi. Go i he uhu. Now, in regards to the question about if kata was ever used to place babies or the tamamuke ga, nā kai loa lahi au koe whakaonga pihe na kai tau kato hatu tolu. Kai loa au koe tau kato sia ga, kai koe tau kato ni tutala ki ai moia, koe tau kato whakaanga tau tōru waha ke lata me tau whiua ke he tau tōru mai he tau ngarue me whakaanga i kaina. Kai nā kai ai loa lahi au, koe whakaanga pihi na kai tau kato tau tōru e tau waha whakamua ke tuku ke tau tama muke muke. Ringa mai ki a wiri whakateo ke lau whakalaulahi ka eki kua whai loto matala ia ke whahia, tuku atu mne ke purotu ko wiri, whakawela ke uhu, kato kumi kumi.
Thanks for your question, Joy. When we spoke to the grandmothers, it didn't actually come up in terms of them using those katos as putting their baby in. But I do know for Māori, they use those pipi pots. And that's sort of something that we were thinking along the lines that could be relevant, and having that as a way of putting our baby. But I'm not too clear on that because we didn't find it in our interviews that we did with the grandmothers up in Niue. But it's something that we could look as we look ahead and in the future as something that could be used or relevant in terms of our grandmothers and the old people back in that time.
Yes, there's a question from Kara, a comment from Kara. Jess?
Cara, did you want to speak to that?
Hei whalawhala ia ki te tolo se mga nei, o e whalawhala he tua ko mai ki te tolo ki whelwe ia. Whalawhala ia ki te tolo si kua whalataha mai whoki a whiawhi. I'm sure most of you know me. Karaponi o ki sene ngafa, ko e tamaha kulipitone mo mata tose na lofi and tuapa. And no worries about the head of Pacific Health at the moment. Jess, it's no problem at all. I was hoping that we just keep it that way. That really is sort of what he was anyway. But just to koe sika no for the tolu, shall I speak in English or in Niue or both? Ka no for the tolu ke manatu ke he ke te tolu te mamatua. I mean, even now with my, ancestral knowledge, tunga ni whahe tala hauka te mamatua, my grandparents to my parents to me, koe hato tolu tau, ta whanau koe hapai, and we hold them to us. That's very much. So the pepi pods is out of a lot of the research around sudden unexpected death of the infant. Well, a lot of the research was done around Europeans and around, the issues around co-sleeping. Si koe on ono Togahai in New Zealand, all the research and it was around the high SUDI rates were also associated with a lot of smoking, co-sleeping, and there was a lot of alcohol as well in those days, was my understanding reading. And so therefore the babies ended up being squashed. But a lot of our hatotolo matua there, it's very much around, so a lot of the evidence was done around that. So the mai moia to the Māoris, and they felt that, weaving the wahakura, which is what that we are using now, instead of, because sometimes you have, if you put the baby in the bed, for a lot of evidence that they're using is around putting them inside, these plastic containers, and then you go sleep with them. That was the original ones that were used with a little mattress inside. So, so that's sort of where all that came from. It's the mai moe he tau mauli, he tau tangata motu nei, and then they thought that if they weave the wahakura, but I don't think, from my knowledge and understanding in terms of Te Ao Māori, that was part of what they did in the old days. Si koe tau, all that is now coming in si koe, I think that's probably where joy is coming through, do we need to do the same with the Niueans, but I think we have to go back to the sacred knowledge that we do have, he te mamatua tūtolu, and that's what we used to do in the islands a lot. On ono whakahahai mune with a lot of the internet, a lot of our children are now saying, all the evidence around what they want to do now and not go sleeping with the babies. Si ka toka ni he tamakaha ke magalili ni ka hahe on its own cot and things like that, which is very hard for some of us to understand that, but I think that's where the background is. So yeah, I hope that answers your questions, but it's very, very tricky. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, yeah. I wonder, Mone, if you or anyone on that side wanted to add to that discussion.
Longo nau he tau tamane ne tuku e tau kato ka koa. I'm just trying to figure out if it was a woven kato kautaha or ke kato hui moa. So that's something that I need to look at. But and ko hearsay, I mean, I heard people talking about putting their babies in te tau kato ia ke mawhana, just to keep them warm and you know, nicely ventilated. During the day or at nighttime, but I mean, it's food for thought. Be good to ask around and see if, you know, what type of basket so it was being used to, you know, for babies.
Just koe fafa. I think the Niueans on the call will know what I mean. Na fafa e do tama. Traditionally, na uta whana na tuwhi whine e tama muke with her all day long in the plantation, in the house. Fafa e tama. That's I know for a fact that that's a common Niuean practice. Ke fafa e tama muke. And the baby is with the mother all day long. Ai loa, the taina da oma moni, ai loa he mo ka whakamoheninga, moheni me matua whiwhine. But during the day and when the mum is busy, I know they are carried around pretty much constantly all day. Na I toka tama, toka taha no ni. It's a protective thing that the baby is carried around by the mother all day. Koe whawhakahai, e kubuniwe ne whakaonga he ne, whawhe tama. That's my limited knowledge. But on a broader inquiry, there's plenty of young Niueans studying, and here we are kind of looking around in the dark because we don't really know our own history and practices as well. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just observing that we should know, and here we are. Really, we don't know, and so plenty of opportunity for young Niueans to, because our infant weaning practices. Whiake tamamuke gaha, you know, is a well-known, tried and true practices from when before they're born and so on, and it'll make a very nice master's or a PhD for someone. Wawela, Jess.
Oh, Nicole. I agree also that not just young Niue researchers, there's plenty of space for people wanting to return to education to come through too. And of course, you know, through the different projects that each of the panelists have talked about, you know, they have very expansive collaborative networks. You don't have to do research on your own. Obviously, we have a kind of Western setup in a lot of the institutions, or like masters or PhD, but you can always work on these in cohorts or groups or collectives. So do keep that in mind. I noticed that Nuhi had some questions. Nuhi, are you able to answer those?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the presentations, Lily, Birtha, and Il. I really enjoyed listening to them. So my first question to the panel is, does Niue have research priorities? And the second question is around dissemination. Now, I know that dissemination usually for researchers, an academic paper in a journal. However, I don't think that type of dissemination is useful for our communities. What we need to try and think about is go beyond the paper in an academic journal and this is something that Billy and I had talked about in this latest project that we're doing, is that we actually have to go back to the community and teach them how to use the data that we wrote up nicely in that academic paper. And we don't do enough of that. So, you know, those are my questions to the panel. Do we have any research priorities for Niue, both here in New Zealand and in Niue itself? And in terms of dissemination, we need to think a little bit more about the academic paper in the journal.
Ilya, I think maybe if you start and then the others might come in.
Yeah, I think, thank you for the questions, Niue. I think for your first question in terms of the priorities, for me as a researcher and an academic, I think whatever priority that it's relevant and useful for us in terms of doing research, whether it's going to be diabetes, obesity, or gout, or whatever sort of disease you may have, then I think for a researcher perspective, that's important and it's relevant because there's not enough of research that's done on our Niue community, both here in New Zealand, but also up in Niue. But I'm always open to looking at Niue in terms of what are their priorities, because for me personally, my preference is to do a piece of research that's going to be relevant, useful, and important. It's no good doing a piece of research that's going to sit on the shelf or it becomes a publication. I'd rather do a research that's going to be more impactful for our community, but we get something out of it in terms of the research topics that we may choose. So that's one thing that I always advise my students to do, is do a piece of research that's going to be useful for your community, whether it's, you know, whatever topic it may be, but it's going to be helpful, it's going to be beneficial in terms of getting that knowledge, especially for Niue, because we don't have a lot of Niue researchers that's looking at our own topics and using our own lenses in terms of our interpretation for the stories or the narrative that's been told. The second question I want to pick up too, Niue, and I know we've had quite a few discussions about this, especially if you're working in the Pacific region. Taking the research back, it has to be in a way it's going to be useful then, because from an academic point of view, you can do the publications, you can do the reports, but for me, it's more meaningful to try and use those reports in a way it's going to be useful in terms of the community, whether it's a community intervention, whether it's a community program, or whether it's a policy or a strategy, something that's going to be beneficial for them. And it's also asking them, what would you like in terms of where this research is going? What would be more useful? What will be more beneficial? And giving this results back to you, not in a way of a publication or a report, but it has to be a way that's going to be useful in a health promotion activity or a community setting. I'm still working on that, and I still haven't figured that one out, but it's more so asking what the community wants, what the government wants, what the ministry wants, and it's coming to some sort of conclusion that's going to be useful and beneficial. So I hope that gives you an outline of your two questions, Niue.
Cool, thank you. I think it's, I mean, when I think about Niue research, I often think it's a little bit about, it's like Wangahau Niue. We don't seem to know where we're heading and where we're going in terms of things. So I suppose when I was talking about priorities, what are the priorities for us as a population, both here in New Zealand and both in Niue? Do we know what they are? Have we gone out and have we asked people? Because sometimes, you know, you're doing health research, Birtha's doing research on Wangahau Niue, and Il's doing research on Niue and cosmogony. Jess is doing research on education, I think, Jess, am I right? So I'm just trying to, you know, the question is really, what are our priorities, and should we have some priorities in order to determine the research projects that we apply for.
Oh, morning, over to you.
Kawela I manuhi ke he tau huhu hao. I'm not privy to the Taonga Niue strategy or their priorities of research at the moment, but I know they're doing a lot of research, but there are not enough people to pursue the research, and they're looking at reviewing the Taonga Niue publication that was published in 2008. And I believe half that publication, I mean, the activities have not been implemented simply because of the shortage in capacity. In terms of presenting back to the communities, recently Jason and a lot of other people who are also doing research on Niue have been coming back to present back to the communities, and they really appreciate that. Fia lai te mamatua ke whanongongo, ke tau kumikumianga ia, ne tau si he tau pulotu Niue, hakoa na kai whai pihia he waha whamua. So that was a good precedence, just listening back to the feedback, the findings of the research. That's really valuable for our community here, especially the grassroots community who attend this session. So we also have Chloe coming back in October to present her research back. So I'm organizing an audience for Chloe's research. So it's encouraging all Niue diaspora, if you're doing research on Niue, to please come back and present it back to the community. Go ilahi.
Ia, e hua manuhi hangawi au e mahuinga whiwhi e tau kumikumianga. Tengo e huia kwa lata ki a tau tūru e ne kwa whitai loto he tau ngā huanga pihi nei, ke mai ki whuki a tau tūru ki sia kwa hingo e tau re kua, buke e whalu e tau kumikumianga kwa lata, me mahuinga, tunga ni talahau e wili moia, ke whakalaulahi buke e whakamahomu atu e tau tutuanga he tau tangata Niue ka. Nā kai ni ke motu ko Niue, kai pihia whuki he motu nei ko Ni Silani, ke riu panataki mo e mau e tau matutaki anga ia whuki ne tohia e ke he tuhi whakatakataka ngā hua he Taonga Niue he tau tolu ke maiki ke mau e tau whakahuanga ke lata molo tolu na nofu he motu pihia whuki mo tau tolu he motu ne ko Ni Silani. Kai peheha kwa tala whuki ringa laulahi he tau mana ia, tau mata kupu ne walata ke kumikumi ki ai. Haha he tau tangata na nofu he motu ne ko Ni Silani, ha koe lahi e he puke tangata na nofu he ne. Ringo osi te tau wala ne toi he tu he whara ma he whaatako whakaue.
Oh, just coming back to the questions in the chat, I feel like I might have missed someone. Leila or any of the crew, are you able to? I've got one from Anili and Sikiki. They might not be able to talk through. I'll just ask it on their behalf. So in terms of further education, would you say that Auckland is the best place to come? They're a bit lost as to how or where to reach out as they live in regional New South Wales and so-called Australia. Any recommendations from the panel?
Was the question about coming to study here for qualification, Jess?
Well, not really. Hello, I'm not sure where you can see me in the window, but it was more for the research aspect. So I already have a master's, so I'm just wondering how that is helpful for our community and where I would need to go. So I feel like it's Auckland, but I'm not sure. So, or is it, ANU? Just only because this is probably the best room to ask that question, because there are so many academics and I'm happy to take this off the off screen later, but it was just it's exciting to see so many Niueans in the education space at this level, you know. So is it Auckland? Like, I really have no idea.
I guess, Jess, perhaps if I could offer an opinion.
Yeah.
I think the best thing probably, Neely, is to get an email address from Lisimoni or Leila or one of the crew.
Okay.
Because there's a short answer and then there's a not so short answer. It depends on what it is you're interested in, funding, practicalities, all of that kind of stuff. So it's not so much the place. In our place, we focus on health. So if you wanted to do something around health, then maybe us. But there are other people around the country.
Okay.
So it depends on what it is that you are interested in and what you want to do. And there will be plenty of people, your family, your friends, your networks, who can help you engage with the communities. But given the time limitations we have, suggest you get in one of Leila or Lisimoni or someone. Can you just connect with Nelly and get an email, and we can follow up offline after this.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
I'll put one shout out for coming to the south. Otago also offers programs for researchers. It's definitely useful to find out where all our Niue scholars are. I know we have some over in Australia. Obviously, Mone and the crew are over in Niue, and then throughout Aotearoa, we kind of pop up in lots of different places. And having a Niue supervisor can be really important. It's not essential. Right, there's other researchers out there. I would also make a recommendation for Pacific Studies as a space for engaging in Niue knowledge, in that it is transdisciplinary, meaning you can kind of work within the kind of broader context of Niue worldviews by connecting with history as well as kind of contemporary issues. Colin's got a bit. Oh no, that's just you. So yes, lots to do there.
Okay, thank you.
Just, I was also going to suggest the University of Queensland, their growing population over there. Also, the Pacific academics are also growing in that space in the School of Population Health and also public health. So that could be an option if you wanted to look into doing it in Australia.
Yeah, I have a history background, so thank you though. Thank you so much.
Well, good. Nale just dropped somewhere in there, the te pautoko at auckland.ac.nz. If anybody does have questions that they don't get to ask this evening. Are there any other questions that we might quickly get to? I can't see if people are putting their hands up. It's been an exceptional evening. So tonight's session is actually showing Niue research excellence, I think, and the opportunities for all researchers have to engage in the vastness of Niue knowledge through all of these different modes or mediums, right? Through language, through culture, through history, through practices, through basket weaving, right? But also through some of the traditional disciplines that we have, including health and the humanities and sciences more broadly. So while many might shy away from the term researcher, as I think we've kind of had in a couple of the webinars prior to this, tonight's panelists, I think, are really great examples of how anybody can be a researcher, and there's urgent need. There is urgent need for many more Niue researchers to do Niue research in Niue specific ways. So if you are interested, if your family members are interested, then please do encourage them to enter into this space. It doesn't have to look like university or tertiary institutions. There are lots of different ways to engage in research, but do reach out and do stay engaged. So Whakauwelahi maha ki to our presenters, Professor Vili Nosa, Birtha Lisimoni Togahai, and Ioane Aliki Whawai, to the coordination from Leila Rex, Sir Colin Tukui Tonga, and the rest of the team at Te Pautoko Roa Kiwa. Whakauwelahi to Niue Department of Health and to everyone online for joining us. Before we head back to Niue for a closing liongi, I'll hand over to Sir Colin for some notices and final remarks. Over to you, Colin.
Jess, thank you very much. Superb job by you. Thank you very much. Kavili mo io mo Birtha tu gode de manatu for awelahi gam tulu he follow mai de blutu mo kelata mo afia fata tulu for awelem hake we tu low. I just wanted to say thank you to Jess firstly, job well done, keeping everybody online, including me, to Prof. Nosa, Moni mo io, Tulo, thank you very much. Fantastic contributions from the three of you. And of course to everyone online for joining us. For those who interested, this is an ongoing process. On the 7th and 8th of November at Whale Maama here in Auckland, there's a research symposium, and Leila or Lisi will share details. So if you've got an idea, you've got a project, you've got a publication, you've got something, get in touch and come and join us at that symposium. We try to be inclusive. We're acutely aware of the fact that our bent is health. But as you will see from this evening's conversation, it can be anything we want. And from my point of view, just having a whole lot of you, mostly Niuean on the call, sharing your talents and interest and joining in is just absolutely fantastic. And so the idea of the symposium in November is again to share knowledge. And there will be some preparatory webinars leading up to that event. Like a lot of things we do, we have to put in the effort and find our own rhythm and steam, if you like, to try to bring this together. No one is funding us to do these things, so we have to do it ourselves, I guess. But I think the interest and the participation this evening and in previous webinars has been fantastic. We're happy to coordinate and plan these things, but the value and the utility of it all depends on everyone contributing. So, as I say, Leila and or Lisi will share the details of that event. Jess, whakawela maha ke awhiawhi mawhala awhiawhi ne onona du tūlu gai, whamuine atua a du tūlu, whakawela maha ke oe tūlo.
Hello. Over to you, Mone and Niue, to close us.
Ufelo ke atua maliongi, atua te tonu, mai li lifu ko liwa ke o te matulu e tau whakaue ke a koe ke hawhiawhi nei. Oe tūtulo ke hawa te kitaki anga mawhala, ke ha matula tau whakatūtala anga. Ke he kehe, mai longa o la sia whoke tau oa matulu ha koe tau pulotu ko mai ke whituwha ke tau manatu ke hawhiawhi. Oe tūtulo whoke ke alau tūle tau tangata Niue me tau motukehe ni kua whanangonongo mai ki he ha matula whakahaloanga ke a whiawhi nei. A matula ike a koe ke le veki mai pui mai a matulu ke he a whiawhi. Ma vehe a matulu me o atu ke tau o whanga, no nofa ni ala tūla tau kaina mai mawhala. Kai o leo tu mamatua te tōnu ko koe ke whakamunuina, ko koe ke whakawhaikakana mai e tau manatu kua tuwhatuwha ke he a whiawhi. Ke ae ke ia mo takitaki ke ha matula tau mamoui, ke watu ki mua. Me whakawhaikakana whoki ko he ngoa ni e puhala ko mai ke awai ke whakakisi mai ke watu matur ki ai. Whakamunuina ke lau tūru osi nei. Tau se osi kahaloanga ke a whiawhi, haka tau mana nei kua oli o tuke hao hinga tapu, mo le lifu, amen.
Bye, Birtha. Bye, Vili. Io, Jess.
Beautiful.
Koelahi, muine po.